Hi there. You might think that a king's death is some grand event, full of tragedy, dramatic speeches, and holy omens. But you'd be wrong. In reality, a medieval death is nothing but a banal, exhausting routine with no room for heroics, and suffering just becomes another piece of furniture in your room. But before you get comfortable, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is there. I'm really curious to see who's joined us. Now, settle in. We're getting started. You do not remember your first breath, nor the coldness of the marble walls in the chamber where you entered the world. You cannot recall the murmurs of women huddled in the corners, whispering prayers in low voices, or the midwife's trembling hands as she weighed the possibility of life against the much more familiar certainty of death. Yet you, infant that you are, have arrived in Jerusalem, a city choked with dust, incense, fear, and the vague hope of salvation. Your mother, queen by title, and yet as mortal as any peasant, looks down at you with the wary relief of someone who has outlasted the statistics this time. She has already lost children to fevers, to coughing fits in the night, to that mysterious wasting that devours even the most golden of infants. You, however, seem to breathe. You squeal. You twitch your impossibly small fingers. For a moment, it almost looks like you have escaped the first of the city's many curses. Of course, you have not. Not really. You have merely delayed the inevitable. In the kingdom of Jerusalem in the 12th century, death is not an enemy to be defeated, but a companion, one who sits at the end of every corridor and waits behind every door. The best you can hope for is to make its acquaintance as late as possible, and even then, only after it has already visited your friends, your siblings, your parents, your playmates, and possibly even the house cat. The court, for all its finery and the echoes of Latin prayers, is a place of anxious calculation. Every child born is a potential heir, but also a potential corpse. Each cradle is measured as much for its suitability as a coffin as for its capacity to rock. So when you are born, there is joy, certainly, but it is the cautious, careful joy of gamblers who have learned to lose more often than they win. The king, your father, is almost afraid to hope. You, for your part, are mostly indifferent. Infants tend to be. You suckle, you sleep, you soil linens that will never really be clean, no matter how often they are scrubbed or how much rose water is wasted in the effort. It is said, by the few scholars with leisure to ponder such things, that the world into which you are born is itself unwell. Jerusalem is a city under siege, not always by armies, though there are enough of those, but by disease, hunger, and the ever present rot that crawls through the stonework and settles in the bones of its people. The palace tries to keep these miseries at bay with silk hangings, with imported perfumes, and with the endless droning of priests. The palace is mostly unsuccessful. Still, you, small and helpless, are wrapped in whatever passes for luxury. Your nurses hum to you the songs of old Europe, half remembered and tinged with homesickness. Somewhere outside, a funeral bell tolls, as if to remind everyone that the world is not finished with its dying just because a royal child is born. You are given a name, Baldwin, as if the weight of history might protect you from what the future has planned. It will not. The chroniclers, with their ink stained hands and their penchant for bad Latin, will one day look back at this moment and write as if your fate was obvious from the start. They will describe omens, unusual clouds, the howl of a stray dog, a sudden wind that slammed shut the window as you first cried. But for now, no one knows, and so you are swaddled and presented, a new Baldwin in a city already worn out by old fears. You are not the only baby born in Jerusalem this year. The others, those outside the palace walls, will have names no one records and lives even more fragile than yours. Most of them will not survive their first winter. Even within the palace, with its courtyards and fountains and attempts at hygiene, illness is always circling. The wet nurse whispers a prayer every time you cough, just in case it is the sort of cough that will end with a burial. In these early days, you are the blank slate onto which everyone projects their hopes, their ambitions, and their secret dread. Your mother frets over your skin. Is that rash the sign of an approaching fever, or merely the result of bad swaddling? The physician, summoned with much ceremony, sniffs and nods, convinced that your health is proof of God's favor, a statement he repeats for every infant, at least until they die. For now you are alive. That is enough to fill the palace with a cautious, superstitious joy. But already the wheels are turning. The city is uneasy, and the world in which you are born is less a cradle and more a testing ground, a place where the strong are broken and the weak are simply swept away. And so, from your very first gasp of air, you begin the slow, inevitable journey toward the kind of end that makes for a good sermon, but a rather unsatisfactory life. You do not know it yet, but death has already written your name in its ledger. Welcome to Jerusalem. Welcome to the 12th century. Welcome to your brief, unremarkable, and ultimately doomed life. Your childhood is not the adventure story later chroniclers will imagine, but a slow motion parade of tedium, anxiety, and vaguely unpleasant smells. You are a prince, yes, but a child all the same, fragile, small, and not particularly aware of your so called destiny. What you are aware of most acutely is dirt. It is everywhere. Dirt in the palace courtyards, ground into the cracks between ancient stones by generations of sandaled feet. Dirt in your own hair, no matter how often your nurse tries to rinse you with water that has already been used twice this week. Dirt in the food, in the linens, in the air you breathe. Your life is accompanied by the perpetual, gritty sensation of something unpleasant lurking just out of sight. You are not alone in this. Jerusalem, despite its reputation for holiness, is as filthy as any city ever built by men who think of themselves as special. Your earliest memories are not of holy processions or the shining domes of the city, but of the sting of soap in your eyes, the metallic taste of water that has sat too long in its clay jug, the buzzing of flies that seem to multiply no matter how many servants swat at them. Your world is bounded by the feverish energy of adults who worry too much, by the endless procession of clergy who hover at your bedside with relics and rags. Each sniffle, each cough is a cause for concern. Each scratch on your knee is treated as if it might turn into something biblical. You are introduced, before you can even talk, to the rituals that are supposed to keep you alive. There are prayers at dawn and at dusk, incense burned in your chambers, and salt sprinkled in the corners to ward off evil. Superstition is not just a pastime, it is a survival strategy. You are made to wear little amulets, each one promising to keep away a different kind of death. One for fevers, another for spirits, a third just in case the others were not enough. Faith is less a matter of personal conviction than of practical necessity. Your tutors, stern and unsmiling, teach you the Psalms alongside your first words. You learn that the sign of the cross should be made before you eat, before you sleep, before you sneeze. Priests murmur blessings over your food, your water, your toys. Everything is sacred, and therefore, everything is also potentially dangerous. You have playmates of a sort, other noble children, the offspring of knights and courtiers, are brought to the palace so you can all pretend at normality together. You build little fortresses out of cushions. You chase each other through the hallways, and you inevitably end up squabbling over whose turn it is to be king. But even here, sickness lurks. When one of your playmates does not appear for several days, no one says the word plague. They simply stop mentioning him at all. Soon, a new child arrives in his place, with new anxieties and a fresh set of talismans. Your world is governed by cycles of fear and hope, held together with whispered prayers and the comforting illusion that someone somewhere knows what they are doing. Your nurse tells you stories about saints and martyrs, about children who were saved by faith or lost to wickedness. You quickly learn that there is no real pattern. Sometimes the good die young, and sometimes the wicked live long enough to become tedious. The palace itself is a museum of superstitions. The kitchens have their own rituals, a pinch of salt thrown over the shoulder, a charm nailed to the door frame. The guards mutter their own private invocations, clutching wooden beads or iron crosses. The queen, your mother, watches over you with the haunted eyes of someone who has survived too many funerals. Each time you so much as sniffle, she is at your bedside, clutching at the sleeve of your nightshirt, her prayers rising in urgency as your fever rises. Occasionally, some disaster in the city, an outbreak of sickness, a failed harvest, will send a ripple of panic through the palace. Suddenly, everyone is fasting, or flagellating, or lining up to kiss whatever fragment of a saint happens to be on loan from the nearest monastery. You are made to participate, whether you understand or not. Grown men and women, supposedly the most important people in the kingdom, look to you, little you, for some sign that God is still paying attention. There is, of course, the daily routine of not dying. You are given medicines that taste of dirt and bitterness, administered by a procession of self important men in robes. One day, you are told, you will understand the significance of these rituals. For now, you simply endure them, quietly cataloging the indignities of your rank. Every so often, someone will remark on your pale skin, your tendency to tire easily, the curious numbness in your fingers. But children are supposed to be odd, and there are always more pressing concerns. For now, you are still alive, and in Jerusalem in the 12th century, that is enough to keep hope and superstition alive for one more day. Your childhood is neither golden nor tragic. It is merely what it is, a careful negotiation with fate, conducted one cough, one prayer, one gritty mouthful at a time. Your destiny for the moment is to survive until tomorrow, and in Jerusalem, that is more than most can say. There are moments in your childhood when you realize that not all is as it should be. These are not dramatic moments. There is no thunderclap, no bolt from the blue, no sign scrawled across the sky. Rather, there are the slow, tedious betrayals of the flesh, the subtle, creeping oddness that settles first in your hands. You notice it, at first, in the smallest ways. You struggle to grip a wooden toy knight, its paint worn away by the endless attentions of your bored hands. You drop it more often than before. Your nurse, always vigilant, attributes this to childish clumsiness. She tuts and retrieves the knight for the third time in an hour, her face carefully neutral. You know the look, grown-ups pretending not to worry. You try to ignore it. Everyone is tired. Everyone is frail in their own way. The palace is full of children, with coughs that never go away, with knees that never quite heal. But there is something strange about your fingers, a stiffness in the joints, a pale swelling that comes and goes like the tide. Some days your hands tremble for no reason. Other days you wake to find them numb, as though they have fallen asleep and cannot be coaxed awake. At meals, you fumble with bread and spill your wine. Your tutor notes your slowness with the quill, but assumes you are simply lazy, or perhaps spoiled. You wish you could agree, but when you look at your hands in the faint candlelight, you see that they are not quite like your brother's hands. They look older, somehow, less like the hands of a prince, more like the cracked, work-worn paws of the palace gardener. Adults whisper. They always do. You overhear snatches of conversation, words like numbness, swelling, weakness. There are more visits from the court physician who peers at your hands, presses your skin until it goes white, and asks you if you can feel the prick of his needle. Sometimes you can, sometimes you cannot. When you cannot, the air in the room turns heavy and tense, as if everyone is waiting for something invisible and dreadful to happen. No one says the word leprosy, not yet. It is a word too big, too final, too soaked in centuries of superstition and fear. For now, you are merely delicate, sensitive, in need of rest. Your mother prays harder. Your father turns away, busy with the business of losing wars and keeping his kingdom together with little more than wishful thinking. And yet, the days pile up and your hands grow stiffer. You learn to hide it as best you can. There is a sort of palace choreography to illness. Everyone pretends, for as long as possible, that nothing is wrong. You clench your fists beneath the table. You grit your teeth and try to write with a quill that seems determined to leap from your grasp. You try not to cry when you cannot tie the laces of your tunic without help. Your friends, the ones who are still alive, notice the change. Some tease you, gently at first, then with a meaner edge as the months wear on. They are children, and children are expert at sniffing out weakness. One boy, the son of a lord with more ambition than sense, challenges you to arm wrestling matches and always seems surprised when you lose. The palace physician tells your mother that you need more rest, more baths in herbal infusions, more prayers to saints whose names you cannot pronounce. The servants are the worst. They try to be kind, but you see the fear in their eyes. One old nurse makes the sign of the cross every time she hands you a cup. Another, usually so talkative, now avoids your gaze as if she is afraid of catching something from a glance. You try, with the strange stubbornness of the very young, to prove that you are not weak. You force your fingers to grip the sword hilt during your fencing lessons, though the pain is sharp and bright and almost sweet in its intensity. You learn to hold your breath when the pain gets bad, to swallow the complaints that threaten to escape. You do not want to be pitied. You do not want to be different. But difference in the palace is like a stain, it spreads. The priests offer you new amulets, each heavier and more useless than the last. The court herbalist gives you potions that make you gag and retch. Your father, when he visits, squeezes your shoulder in silence, his face shadowed by something like grief. No one can say for certain what is happening, but everyone suspects. In the corridors, behind closed doors, the word curse is muttered as often as illness. Some blame your mother's family. Others blame the sins of your ancestors. No one, of course, blames the filth, the hunger, the city itself. Jerusalem, after all, is holy. At least, that is what the priests keep insisting. You become expert in silence. You learn to move carefully, to mask the limits of your body, to pretend that every day is like the last. But the truth is there, in your hands, in your wrists, in the way your body betrays you, in the smallest, most humiliating ways. You begin to understand, slowly and with mounting dread, that the palace is not just a home. It is a waiting room, a place to count down the days until someone is brave enough to speak the truth aloud. And so your childhood, never truly carefree, becomes a careful performance. You bow, you smile, you say your prayers, all the while watching your own hands as if they belong to someone else. You are the prince, the hope of your dynasty, the child of Jerusalem, and your own body is already making plans to betray you. As your fingers stiffen and your hands betray you, a new parade begins in the palace, a parade of wisdom, or at least of those who claim it. You, small and stubbornly alive, become the subject of the city's collective expertise, which is vast and terrifyingly useless. Physicians, monks, astrologers, magicians, even a rumored hermit from the desert, are all given their moment in your sick room. They arrive draped in their various uniforms of authority, heavy robes, odd hats, crosses of wood or silver, pouches that reek of stale herbs and older fears. Each of them brings their own arsenal of treatments, and each is convinced that he alone holds the secret to your recovery, or, at the very least, to convincing your family that he should be handsomely paid. You have the dubious privilege of being poked, prodded, and peered at by men whose confidence is matched only by their ignorance. The court physician, the most important of the lot by virtue of his title alone, starts the proceedings. He inspects your fingers, squinting as if hoping your affliction will reveal itself under the right sort of glare. He asks if you can feel this pinch, or that needle, or the pressure of his cold, dry hands. Sometimes you can, sometimes you cannot. This appears to satisfy no one, least of all yourself. He prescribes what he prescribes for everything: more rest, fewer sweets, a regime of herbal concoctions so bitter they make you weep. Your nurse, stoic as always, holds your nose and tips the mixture down your throat. If you choke or cough, you are told that means it is working. You begin to suspect that survival is simply the ability to endure the treatments. After the physician come the monks. They shuffle in, eyes downcast, muttering prayers in Latin that you only half understand. One produces a fragment of a saint's bone wrapped in silks and smelling faintly of decay. Another brings a vial of oil, which he dabs onto your forehead with the air of a man anointing a future martyr. They argue in low voices over which psalm is most effective for a weakness of the extremities. You listen, but it is all background noise, an endless drone of piety, more sleep inducing than any of the potions. Next come the astrologers, who are more colorful, if no more useful. They examine the position of the stars and conclude that your troubles are the result of a malign conjunction between Mars and Saturn, or perhaps the influence of a comet that passed overhead the year you were born. They suggest you wear a particular stone, or sleep with your head pointing north, or avoid cabbage on feast days. You try all these things, because what else is there to do? The only thing that happens is that you are hungry more often, and your nurse complains about having to rearrange your bed. Every few weeks, a new healer appears at the palace gates, recommended by a desperate courtier or an anxious relative. One brings a sack of live frogs and proposes to lay them on your hands to draw out the evil humors. Another suggests the application of leeches. The leeches are cold, slimy, and worst of all, entirely uninterested in your blood. Even parasites seem to know there is not much left to gain from your royal veins. Your mother hovers through all of this, her face a study in controlled despair. She sits at your bedside, wringing her hands, accepting every new remedy with a hope that grows thinner by the day. Sometimes she prays aloud, sometimes she simply watches you, as if afraid that blinking might make you disappear. The treatments pile up. There are baths in hot water, then in cold. You are wrapped in linen soaked with vinegar, then in wool anointed with olive oil. You are made to fast, then to gorge on roasted doves, as if your disease is a question of appetite. Priests debate whether this is punishment for some ancestral sin. The court physician, never one to let an opportunity pass, suggests a pilgrimage to a distant shrine, as if a long journey might shake loose whatever is afflicting you. Amid all this, there is the unspoken truth. No one has any real idea what is wrong, nor what to do about it. You are not the first child in Jerusalem to sicken, nor will you be the last. The city itself seems designed to foster disease, with its crowded streets, its stagnant cisterns, its endless traffic of soldiers, pilgrims, and pests. The wise men offer their wisdom, but beneath it all is the simple admission that they are as powerless as you. You become adept at reading the faces of your various healers. You see pity in the eyes of the younger monks, resignation in the older ones. The astrologers, at least, seem to enjoy their work. There is something freeing about blaming the stars for problems no one can solve. The physicians grow quieter with each visit. They poke at your hands less often, content now to recommend prayers and patience, which are conveniently always in ample supply. No one says the word leprosy yet. That word hovers at the edges of every conversation, never spoken, but always present, like a bad smell that will not go away. You learn to dread the silence after a failed treatment, the way everyone avoids looking directly at your hands. Your family clings to hope with the tenacity of the desperate, insisting that you will recover, that you are only delicate, that childhood ailments often pass with time. In the end, the wisdom of the wise men amounts to little more than endurance for them, for you, for everyone forced to watch. Your days settle into a rhythm of pointless treatments, empty prayers, and the constant, nagging awareness that you are growing worse, not better. You are, after all, a child of Jerusalem. In the 12th century, wisdom and medicine are two different things, and you are living proof that neither is a guarantee of survival. In another world, in a different, brighter century, your coronation might have been the highlight of a young prince's life, a day of triumph, a festival of banners and cheers, a moment when a nation pauses to exhale and believe, just for a moment, that something good might come from all the years of fighting, fasting, and festering in the Levantine sun. In this world, your coronation is less a celebration and more a grim necessity, a theatrical performance staged for an audience of anxious lords, suspicious clergy, and foreign dignitaries who smell opportunity the way a dog smells meat. You are crowned because you must be crowned. The kingdom cannot wait for a healthy, grown, glorious king to arrive. It must take what is on offer, a boy who drops his scepter and cannot always feel the weight of his own crown. You are not oblivious to the spectacle. You have always known that nothing in Jerusalem is done simply for show. Every ceremony is a calculation, every prayer a negotiation. The coronation is no different, except that it is your hands that fumble with the velvet of your robe, your face that the crowd peers at, squinting for signs of death lurking just beneath the skin. The sunlight slants through the high windows of the church, illuminating the dust in the air, dust that carries the memory of every other king, queen, and corpse who ever breathed in this place. The crowd is a curious mixture, relatives with too much at stake, bishops who hope your frailty will make you pliant, Knights who glance at each other over your head, calculating how long they will have to serve a ruler who sometimes cannot rise from his bed. The streets outside are filled with the sort of forced merriment only a medieval city can muster, a carnival of filth, sweat, and shouting, with the very real possibility that the wine will run out before the bread does. You wear the crown, but it is heavy, heavier than you expected, not metaphorically, though there is that too, but physically. No one in your family is especially tall or strong, and the gold is thick and unyielding, pressing down on your scalp like a warning. When the bishop anoints you with oil, it drips down your forehead, cold and viscous. You wonder, not for the first time, if the blessing will soak into your skin and heal what the monks and physicians cannot. The ritual proceeds with the grim efficiency of people who have done this too often and always with an eye on disaster. You try to look regal as the bishop intones the ancient words, but your hands shake and you can see the pity in the eyes of the closest courtiers. They are watching for a miracle, or at least for a sign that you might last the year. You kneel, you rise, you are presented to the people. There are cheers, thin, perfunctory, laced with an undercurrent of doubt. Someone releases a dove. It crashes into the rafters and falls at your feet, dead or simply dazed. No one is sure, but the symbolism is not lost on anyone. At the feast, you are seated at the center of a long table, groaning under the weight of food you can barely hold. The roast meats glisten, the candied fruits are piled high, and the wine flows as if by magic. You do not taste much of it. Your hands are stiff, your appetite gone. Every time you raise a goblet, you worry you will drop it, and the watching faces will see, truly see, how fragile you are. Your mother sits beside you, her smile so fixed and brittle it might shatter with a single word. Your father, by now a ghost in his own right, gives you a nod that is meant to convey approval, pride, and confidence in the future. It achieves none of these things. The lords at the far end of the table whisper together. You hear your name followed by phrases like poor boy and God's will, which are always code for how long until we need another king. Outside, the city celebrates or tries to. The common people are told that you are the hope of Jerusalem, that God Himself has chosen you to lead them through the darkness. They eat and drink, because that is what people do when life is uncertain. They cheer for you, because not cheering is dangerous. Later, some will argue about whether you looked well, whether you smiled, whether the trembling in your hands was the excitement of the day, or something much worse. Back in your chambers, when the feasting is over and the music has faded, you sit alone. You remove the crown, its weight leaving a red mark on your brow. You stare at your hands in the flickering candlelight, flexing your fingers as much as you can, as if to reassure yourself that you are still real, still present, still king. The truth, of course, is that you are all these things, and none of them. A boy in a golden prison, a living gamble in a city obsessed with losing bets. The palace is quieter now, but not peaceful. The servants clean up the remnants of the feast. The courtiers find their beds or each other, and the city, for a moment, pretends that nothing is wrong. But you know better. Your coronation is not a beginning, but the next step in a long, slow decline. You are king, yes, but also patient, symbol, and sacrifice. In Jerusalem, in this exhausted century, sickness is never an excuse. It is merely a different kind of throne, one just as cold and unyielding as the gold upon your head. You try to sleep, but the echoes of prayers, speeches, and anxious hopes rattle through your skull. You wonder how many more ceremonies you will endure, how many more crowns you will wear on your head, on your hands, on every part of your failing body. Tomorrow they will call you Majesty, Lord, even Savior. But tonight you are simply tired, and for the first time you suspect that the kingdom is more afraid of your illness than of the armies at its gates. Now that you wear the crown, your body becomes a sort of secret, one that everyone suspects, no one discusses, and you yourself try with mixed results to keep hidden. Your everyday is an exercise in performance, an endless rehearsal of normality in front of people who would much rather see you fail, and a handful who desperately hope you will not. You wake each morning with an inventory. How stiff are your fingers today? How numb are your feet? How many joints creak when you try to rise? And can you make it across the room before the first courtier enters with news of yet another crisis? Your nurses learn to help you dress with minimal fuss, muttering about the chill in the stone floors, always pretending that the bandages and the ointments are for minor scrapes and not for wounds that never close. The rituals of concealment become your new religion. You develop a talent for tucking your hands into your sleeves, gripping the arms of your throne so tightly that the trembling is hidden by the wood itself. When you must eat in a public, you choose foods that require little effort: soft breads, boiled meats, the kind of bland sustenance suitable for a child, though you are now a king. If a cup slips from your grasp, a servant is always there to retrieve it before anyone can notice. If you bleed, your steward invents a story about a knife left too sharp or a hunting accident that happened conveniently when no one was watching. The more you hide, the more you are observed. Every movement is analyzed. Was that a wince of pain or a grimace of thought? Did you forget the name of a nobleman's wife? Or did your tongue simply stick to the roof of your mouth? Your council grows anxious. They murmur to one another in the corners of cold, echoing chambers, discussing not only the affairs of the realm, but the latest rumor about the king's health. You are forced to perfect the art of public suffering. When the pain is sharp, you excuse yourself to pray in your private chapel, a useful euphemism for simply needing a moment to unclench your jaw and let the tears flow in peace. There, among the flickering candles and the cold scent of old wax, you sometimes wonder what it would be like to have a body that obeys, a life without this constant, low thrum of shame. You notice changes in your court. Some faces become kinder, others more predatory. The kind ones avoid your gaze, the predatory ones never look away. Your illness has become a kind of currency, traded in whispers and glances. Your mother, once a regular presence, becomes a kind of ghost, hovering in the doorways, always present, but never interfering, as if she too has learned that hope is something best kept hidden. There are new precautions now. Your linens are changed twice as often. The bowl in which you wash your hands is scalded with boiling water. The servants who attend to you do so with gloved hands, and their fear is palpable even when they mask it behind the blank faces of obedience. You understand. Sickness is a kind of contagion, but fear is even worse. You watch the way the guards step aside as you pass, the way the pages glance at your hands, and then away, quickly, guiltily, as if caught in some indecent act. The doctors are no longer quite so hopeful. They still visit, still mumble their prayers, and apply their pointless salves, but the tone has changed. There is resignation in their voices now, a heaviness that was not there before. They avoid promising you recovery. They talk instead of comfort, of management, of endurance, a long list of words that all mean no cure. You become adept at inventing stories. When your feet drag, you say you twisted an ankle on the steps. When your voice falters, you blame the dryness of the desert air. When someone asks about the dark stains on your sleeves, you laugh and say the ink pots have become your greatest enemy. Sometimes the lies work. More often, they simply hang in the air, sad little banners of denial fluttering in the drafty hallways. Even your enemies are careful with you now. There is an unspoken agreement that you are to be pitied, but not publicly, lest it draw attention to the obvious. Jerusalem is ruled by a boy king who cannot grip his own sword. In council meetings, the old men argue over maps and treaties, always careful to frame their advice as mere suggestion, never command. They watch you for signs, signs of weakness, signs of death, signs that someone else will need to step forward and claim your title. At night, alone, you examine your wounds. You trace the numb patches on your skin, the places where sensation has faded to a dull echo. You watch the way your fingers bend only with effort, the way your feet do not always obey. You are not foolish. You know that hiding these things is like holding back the sea with your bare hands. But for now, the performance must continue. You become, in a way, your own jailer. Every gesture is measured, every step rehearsed. You remind yourself to smile, to nod, to appear interested even when your mind is elsewhere, usually cataloging the latest betrayal by your own flesh. You dream of running, of riding, of simply opening a door without help. You wake to the weight of your body, heavy and treacherous, and the realization that dreams are a luxury for those whose lives are not already mapped out in the slow, inevitable collapse of flesh. The world outside the palace carries on, unaware or uncaring. Armies march, crops fail, pilgrims arrive in their thousands, all seeking miracles in a city that cannot even heal its own king. You remain at the center of it all, a still point in a world of restless movement, learning each day how to hide the parts of yourself that are slipping away. And so you endure. You endure because you must, because kings do not retire, because the kingdom needs a symbol more than it needs a savior. You become the master of pretense, the architect of your own invisibility, even as your body becomes more visible with every passing day. You hide your wounds, not because you believe they will heal, but because to do otherwise would be to admit, once and for all, that the story is already ending, and no one, least of all a king, is ever ready for that. There is a word, finally, that no one wishes to speak, but which now creeps relentlessly into every whispered conversation, every nervous sidelong glance, every trembling prayer at your bedside. Leprosy. The mere syllables fall with the weight of a curse, heavier than any crown you have ever worn. It is not a word used lightly in Jerusalem, a city that has seen every known disease pass through its gates. Yet this one, everyone agrees, is special, sacred, and terrifying all at once. For months, years even, your symptoms have been labeled with softer names: delicacy, weakness of the humors, a passing affliction of the joints. But words, like bodies, eventually give out. The rashes that do not fade, the numbness that creeps further up your limbs, the slow rot of your flesh, all resist the comforting explanations offered by monks and mothers alike. What you are left with is a diagnosis you do not want and cannot deny. It is not that you are called into a chamber, sat down by kindly physicians, and told the news in gentle words. This is not the 12th century of fairy tales and gentle endings. Instead, you notice a change in the air, a shift so subtle you might think you imagined it, if not for its persistence. The palace staff, already skittish, now look at you as though you have become less a person and more an omen. The court physician, once merely useless, is now actively evasive. He speaks to you through a haze of ritual phrases and evasions, but you can see the word forming behind his eyes. Eventually, it escapes. Perhaps it is spoken by a particularly careless monk, or in a fit of exasperation by your exhausted nurse. Leprosy. There it is, at last. Heavy, irreversible, final. It falls between you and the world like a stone into a pond. The ripples spread, first to your mother, who refuses to believe it, then to your advisors, who now look at you as one might look at a cherished vase already cracked beyond repair. Soon, it is the only word that matters. The prayers grow more urgent, the treatments more desperate, but everyone, even the most optimistic among your court, knows the truth. Leprosy, in your world, is not simply a medical condition. It is a theological disaster, a social death, a slow motion public execution. Scripture is quoted at you. Some see your suffering as a sign from God, a test of faith, or a punishment for hidden sins. Others see you as a political liability, a king whose disease, once revealed, might weaken the very bones of the kingdom. No one really sees you at all anymore. You are now a symbol, an object lesson, a warning. You feel it most sharply in the small things. The way your goblet is replaced more frequently, the way food is brought to you by servants who quickly disappear, the way even your most loyal knights keep an extra pace of distance, as if your affliction might leap from your skin to theirs. In council, your opinion is solicited but not trusted. When you touch parchment, It is discreetly burned afterward. You notice how the cushions you use are aired out in the sun, as if light itself could drive away your disease. You wish you could rage against this injustice, but you are tired, so deeply, bone deep tired, that even anger feels extravagant. You remember stories told by priests, how Christ touched lepers, how saints embraced them, how miracles sometimes happened. But you are not a saint, and this is not the age of miracles. This is the age of cautious survival, of cautious compassion, and of the cold, iron logic of fear. There are legal rituals, too. Some advisors suggest that, as a leper, you are no longer fit to rule. There are precedents, they say, other kings who were quietly set aside for the good of the realm. Your mother resists, your few loyalists resist, but the whisper spreads, as all whispers do in a palace, when, not if, the king will step down. Your own body becomes evidence against you. Each new patch of numbness, each fresh wound that does not heal, is another argument for your unfitness. The very people who once fussed over your health now use it as a reason to confine you, to keep you out of sight for your own good. You attend fewer feasts, receive fewer envoys, preside over councils only when necessary. The world shrinks, and you shrink with it. For the people of Jerusalem, leprosy is as much a matter of ritual as reality. There are special prayers, special alms, special ways to keep the unclean separate from the rest. Some whisper that you should be sent to a leper's house outside the city to live among those whom God has marked. Others protest, insisting that you are still their king, still chosen. But all agree on one thing: nothing will ever be the same again. In the privacy of your chambers, you let the word settle over you: leprosy. It is, in its own way, a relief. The long pretense is over. The fiction has run its course. You no longer have to pretend that your wounds are temporary, your pains fleeting. You are at last what you have been becoming for years: a king in name, a leper in body, a living contradiction in a world that prefers its categories neat. You begin to imagine the rest of your life as an exercise in vanishing, fading slowly from counsel, from public view, from history itself. But even as you disappear, the kingdom will remember you, if only as a warning, a prophecy, a curse. In the end, you are both diagnosis and sentence, both symptom and sign. You wonder, not for the first time, whether leprosy is your punishment or simply your inheritance, a cruel gift from a city that eats its kings as quickly as it buries its dead. You once believed your world was populated by people, parents, courtiers, advisors, tutors, friends. You imagined that each played a clear role in the delicate machinery of the palace, their positions as certain as the sun rising over Jerusalem's walls. But now, as your illness is spoken of openly, as the word leprosy hangs in the air like the smell of a long extinguished candle, you begin to see your circle for what it is: a collection of shifting shadows, each responding to your sickness in their own petty, predictable way. The change is subtle at first. Some courtiers develop a sudden fascination with distant provinces or hunting. They beg leave to manage estates on your behalf, which really means as far from you as possible. Others stay close, but only because your crown might yet fall into their lap. They grow more attentive, not to you, but to your weaknesses, as if collecting evidence for some future trial. Your most loyal servants, those who once took pride in the intimacy of their service, now handle you with the delicacy one might reserve for a sack of rotting fruit. Your bathwater is left outside your chamber door. Your food arrives under a cloth, the tray handled by boys who run before you can thank them. The court physician, who once enjoyed explaining every detail of your treatment, now delivers his opinions with the brevity of a man eager to finish the conversation and scrub his hands. Those few companions who remain attempt bravery. They play chess with you or walk beside your litter through the gardens. But even these, your most trusted, have mastered the art of not looking directly at your hands, of never mentioning the faint, sweet odor that now trails after you like a secret. Their laughter is brittle, and you know, because you are now expert at reading faces, that pity is always a hair's breadth away from fear. Some are honest enough to distance themselves openly. A knight who once swore eternal loyalty resigns his post and leaves for a pilgrimage. For your soul and mine, he says, his eyes never meeting yours. The bishop who blessed your coronation now offers his prayers from a safe distance. Your mother, always fierce, is the last to retreat. She sits with you every evening, holding your hand in her own, even as the advisers whisper that this is unwise, unseemly, unsafe. She weathers the gossip with the same stubbornness she once brought to your nursery, but even she cannot halt the slow erosion of intimacy. In time, she too will visit less often, her absences explained away by headaches, fevers, or the demands of court. Worse than the absence, though, is the presence of those who are drawn to you like flies to a wound. They hover, speaking with false sympathy, watching for the chance to turn your decline into their opportunity. Some are obvious: the ambitious lord with too many relatives, the cousin with a claim just strong enough to be dangerous. Others are subtler, their ambitions cloaked in the language of duty and concern. For the good of the realm, they say, it is time to consider the future. The implication is clear: the future does not include you. You become the axis around which their ambitions turn, a sun that is fading, but still too hot to approach without risk. Your decrees are guessed, your decisions delayed. Advisors consult among themselves before coming to you, their suggestions shaped by conversations you never hear. You find yourself surrounded by people who are polite, attentive, and wholly uninterested in your actual wishes. The palace itself changes too. Doors close a little more quickly behind you. Tapestries are replaced more often, allegedly to freshen the air. The routes you take through the halls are carefully scheduled to avoid crowds. Even the dogs, once your loyal companions, are kept at a distance. You miss their simple, unquestioning presence. The priests increase their visits, but you know that prayer is not the only thing on their minds. They come to study you as much as to save you, to judge whether your affliction is divine punishment or an unlucky accident. They bring relics, stories of saints, endless prescriptions for penance. None of them offer comfort. All of them watch to see if your faith falters along with your flesh. In the midst of all this, there are moments of dark comedy. Once, a particularly pious lady of the court drops her rosary in your presence. She refuses to pick it up, instead, asking a servant to retrieve it, her hands pressed together in prayer, her eyes wide with fear. Another time, a well meaning page brings you a plate of figs and leaves it just out of reach, forgetting that your arms no longer stretch so far. These indignities pile up, small and constant, reminders that you are no longer quite human in their eyes. At council meetings, your words are greeted with the careful silence reserved for those whose power is slipping. When you express an opinion, there are murmurs of agreement, but little action. You are consulted out of habit, not respect. Every decision is made twice, once in your presence and again in the corridors, where real power now gathers. You begin to feel your own disappearance, the slow vanishing of authority, friendship, and trust. You are present, but less so every day. People talk around you, not to you. You become less a king than a relic, an object of anxious veneration, proof of the kingdom's suffering, but not its savior. The courtiers wait for news of your death as one might wait for news of a storm finally passing. Your world, once crowded, grows emptier with every passing week. Even your shadow seems thinner, stretched out and faded by the relentless sun. Yet in the quiet moments, late at night, when the palace is silent, you find a grim sort of freedom in your isolation. No more pretending, no more performance. You are left alone with your pain, your thoughts, and the lingering sense that even now you are watched, not with hope, but with the exhausted patience of people who have already begun to write the next chapter, one in which you play no part. You may have been taught as a child that kings rule by divine right, that God Himself picked you out like a favored chess piece and set you on the board for a reason. It is a comforting thought, one that never survives the first real taste of illness, or the second, or the 10th. For now, your divine rule is little more than a series of council meetings where everyone waits politely for you to die. The topic of succession, once distant and theoretical, becomes the central obsession of every shadowy corner in the palace. The word leprosy has done more than separate you from your subjects. It has also summoned the vultures, each one cloaked in concern, each one clutching a family tree with just enough claim to cause trouble. The only thing more reliable than your daily pain is the certainty that someone, somewhere, is discussing your replacement over yesterday's bread and this morning's gossip. No one talks about it openly, of course. That would be unseemly. Instead, they approach you with elaborate courtesy, as if excessive manners might disguise their ambitions. The courtiers congratulate you on your courage. They praise your wisdom in matters of state, while quietly debating whether you will live to see the next planting season. You notice that invitations to family dinners become more frequent as if your cousins and half brothers are eager for your company, or perhaps eager for the legitimacy that comes from being seen near a dying king. Every minor noble with a drop of royal blood suddenly remembers your birthday. They bring gifts, a new chess set, a rare book, a falcon that no longer flies. All of it is accompanied by speeches about loyalty and destiny. You, by now, are skilled in the art of smiling while your hands cramp beneath the table. The less you can grip a quill, the more signatures your advisors helpfully offer to forge on your behalf. Meanwhile, the council chambers have become a theater of the absurd. Each advisor presents himself as indispensable to the realm. They debate every possible outcome. Will the next king come from your father's line or your mother's? Will the crown pass to a child, or will a regent rule in his name? Each man has a favorite candidate, each woman a secret alliance. They speak in riddles, quote scripture, and measure their words as carefully as you once measured your steps. Your illness is the unspoken guest at every gathering. When you enter a room, the conversation lurches, staggers, and eventually resumes at a lower, more cautious pitch. No one wishes to appear too eager for your demise, but no one dares ignore the possibility. It is the worst kind of suspense, a play in which everyone knows the ending, but no one will admit to reading ahead. Rumors bloom in the palace gardens like a particularly persistent fungus. Some say you are already dead and that a double sits in your place. Others claim you have secretly chosen a successor, one so virtuous and strong that the kingdom's enemies will drop dead from fright. Still others whisper that your disease is punishment for the sins of your bloodline, and that the next king must be purer, younger, untouched by scandal or sickness. In a city where saints' bones are traded like trinkets, even your DNA is now a commodity. There are moments of farce. One morning, you discover that the guest list for a banquet has been rearranged to ensure your most ambitious cousin sits directly beside you. The hope, apparently, is that proximity to your withered fingers will encourage him to adopt a look of concern that photographers, had they existed, could capture for the ages. Another day, a priest offers you a new relic, a splinter from the true cross, guaranteed to heal the worthy. The implication, naturally, is that if you do not recover, the problem is with your soul, not the wood. Even your most trusted friends are drawn into the intrigue, whether they like it or not. You notice them pulled aside in corridors, their opinions solicited, their loyalties tested. Every relationship is a potential liability. Every word spoken in confidence is another secret currency to be traded and leveraged as the wind changes direction. Your enemies, meanwhile, become strangely polite. They praise your patience, your fortitude, your remarkable grace under pressure. You resist the urge to throw your goblet at them, if only because your grip is not what it used to be. Behind closed doors, plans are drawn up, lists of possible regents, drafts of new laws, alternate histories in which your reign is quietly edited out. At council, your signature is needed more often, but always on documents prepared by others, always at the end of long, suspiciously complicated negotiations. If you hesitate, someone is always on hand to assist. Sometimes you suspect they would guide your hand entirely if you let them. You learn that the true currency of a dying king is not gold or land or armies. It is narrative. Whoever controls the story of your decline will shape the story of what comes next. Some argue you should abdicate to protect your dignity. Others insist you must remain to preserve the appearance of stability. The fact that your body is decaying is secondary. What matters is how gracefully you manage your own disappearance. And so, in the endless afternoons, you listen to the sound of succession, the quiet clicks of rosary beads, the scratch of quills on parchment, the shuffling of feet outside your door. Sometimes you almost laugh. Here you are, King of Jerusalem, ruler of a city at the center of the world, and your greatest power is the ability to make other people uncomfortable. You wonder, as you sit alone in your increasingly empty chambers, how many of these men and women will remember you as anything other than a problem to be solved. In your absence, they will make plans. In your presence, they will smile, bow, and wait. You are no longer the axis of the kingdom, but a pivot around which everyone else spins, each hoping to catch a little of your fading light before it disappears forever. And somewhere, just beyond the stone walls and closed doors, the city waits as well. Its people pray for peace, for rain, for a king who will live long enough to be remembered. In the meantime, you wait with them, surrounded by intrigue, haunted by the possibility that your greatest legacy will be not what you built, but the vacancy you leave behind. You have learned over many dull and tedious hours that the word physician in Jerusalem is only slightly more comforting than the word undertaker. Physicians arrive in your chambers with the same anxious reverence as monks approach a reliquary, full of hope, dread, and the tacit knowledge that the miracle they seek is always just out of reach. It is not that they lack confidence, quite the opposite. Your royal presence attracts every kind of medical authority, from sleek scholars fresh off the ships from Salerno to wild eyed men who claim to have treated Saracen sultans with nothing but honey and the Lord's Prayer. Some swear by Greek wisdom, others by Arabic alchemy, a few by personal visions involving the Virgin Mary and suspiciously medicinal goats. Their common ground is faith, not necessarily in God, though they all claim him as an ally, but in their own ability to invent new rituals, decoctions, and regimes. Science, as you might imagine it from later centuries, has not yet arrived. What you receive instead is a parade of confidence artists, each more theatrical than the last, each convinced that your slow collapse can be reversed with the right combination of patience, piety, and pungent ointment. One day, a physician with a beard so long it requires its own servant presents a concoction proven effective in cases of the sacred fire. It smells of onions, vinegar, and something that might once have been a rabbit. Another arrives with a box of leeches, promising that their gentle attentions will restore the balance of your humors. The leeches, unimpressed, slither away and are quietly never mentioned again. Your regimen soon includes more prayer than eating, more ointments than washing. For every ache, a poultice; for every fever, a purge. The application of hot irons to your feet, the swallowing of powders that taste like chalk and betrayal, the burning of herbs in your sleeping quarters until even your dreams reek of failure. If any of this is effective, it is only in distracting you from the original complaint. For each remedy, a theory. You are told that your melancholic humors must be purged by vomiting, then that your phlegmatic humors require cooling by dousing your feet in water collected from the Jordan. A wandering Jewish healer insists that goat's milk and figs will return feeling to your hands. A visiting Greek suggests that your real problem is insufficient bile. The court astrologer, never one to miss an opportunity, claims the stars are at fault and that you should sleep beneath a different window. You humor them all. What else is left when your body has become a battlefield for the ambitions and superstitions of men who do not have to live with its betrayals? There are public rituals, too. Physicians compete for the favor of the court, each promising what the last could not deliver. They produce scrolls and books, quoting Aristotle, Galen, and Avicenna, names meant to impress rather than to illuminate. When your pain grows too much, they argue for days over whether to apply heat or cold. You listen, half amused, half exhausted, as they debate not your case, but their own reputations. In this way, your body becomes a stage on which egos perform. Each new prescription, a monologue delivered to an audience that has already left the theater. The nurses, for their part, follow orders with grim efficiency. They spoon feed you broths that never taste quite the same twice, each batch improved by whatever new ingredient is currently in vogue. Your sheets are sprinkled with ashes or rosewater or bits of old parchment containing prayers. You submit to all of it, because to resist would be to admit that nothing works, and hope, however thin, is all anyone really has. Sometimes the treatments are painful. Cauterization is a favorite, a heated iron, applied to skin that has long since lost the decency to feel. The smell lingers for days, and so does the memory, even when your nerves refuse to cooperate. Bleeding is another, your veins tapped with the same curiosity reserved for wine barrels, the blood collected and measured, as if the secrets of kingship might float to the surface. The most devout among your healers are never satisfied with mere medicine. They supplement every ointment with prayers, every tonic with an exorcism. One insists that you are haunted, not by spirits, but by envy, the green demon, he calls it, which can only be driven out by fasting for 7 days and sleeping with a prayer stone under your tongue. You do not bother to ask whether any other patients have survived this particular cure. With time, you recognize that the point of these treatments is not your recovery. It is the preservation of ritual, the maintenance of the idea that something can still be done, that order can be restored. The physicians need your sickness as much as you do. It gives them purpose, prestige, and, of course, a steady stream of payment. Even when the treatments fail, there is always another theory, another prayer, another herb yet to be tried. When a new physician arrives, the court buzzes with speculation. Perhaps this one will be different. Perhaps he brings a secret learned in Egypt or a charm from Byzantium. But always, the result is the same. Your wounds remain, your flesh betrays you, your circle tightens as hope, like your body withers. Occasionally, you catch the eye of a younger nurse or servant, a glance that holds not fear, but simple fatigue. You imagine in that moment that you are not a king, not a leper, but just another patient waiting for the slow, inevitable end that medicine cannot forestall. You begin to understand. In Jerusalem, in this era, medicine is a branch of faith, not knowledge. Your physicians are priests in another vestment, their rituals as empty and as necessary as any in the cathedral. You are left to pray, not for healing, but for the patience to endure their efforts and the good humor to laugh when the leeches escape. Thus passes your time, a litany of cures that do not cure, hands that do not heal, prayers that do not reach the ceiling. In another century, they will call it history. For now, it is simply your life. If there is any advantage to your disease, it is this: the gradual, merciful fading of sensation. Pain recedes, not because you are healed, but because your body simply gives up the effort of feeling. The world grows quieter and more distant. Your fingers, once the delicate instruments of a prince, are now clumsy, unreliable things. Sometimes you look at them as though they belong to someone else. It begins with your hands, of course. The numbness spreads, swallowing the memory of what it once felt like to grip a quill, to feel the softness of a plum, to wince at a paper cut. There is a strange liberation in no longer feeling the sting of wounds, the scrape of rough wool, the accidental bite of your own nails. You tell yourself, some days, that this is a blessing, but it is a blessing that comes at a heavy price. The loss of feeling is not just physical. As your nerves retreat, so too do the people in your life. At first, it is subtle. A friend visits less often, citing duties or illness, or the general exhaustion that comes with palace life. A playmate's mother decides the air in your chambers is too damp for her delicate child. The games in the garden dwindle, replaced by the silent company of your own thoughts. You try to ignore the absence, to busy yourself with whatever amusements are still available. Chess, for instance, can be played alone. Books can be read, though even this becomes more difficult as your hands lose their cleverness. Your tutors now turn the pages for you, their faces carefully neutral as you fumble with the text. The loss of privacy is another form of pain, one that never quite goes numb. The servants, always cautious, become more distant. Where once there was conversation, gossip about the kitchens, jokes about the cats, there is now a professional silence. They do their work quickly, eyes averted. They touch you only when necessary, and always with gloves, always with the sort of delicate care reserved for the handling of relics or poisons. You are not entirely surprised. You have read the stories of lepers, even if you never thought to join their ranks. Some try to comfort you. At least it does not hurt, they say, as if the absence of pain is the same as the presence of joy. You nod, because what else is there to do? You do not tell them that the worst wounds are the ones you cannot feel, the ones that open, fester, and remain unseen until a sleeve is stained or a sandal fills with blood. You begin to check your body each night, searching for damage you did not notice during the day. The ritual becomes its own kind of prayer, a small defiance against the betrayal of your flesh. The courtiers and advisors, for their part, find the change convenient. It is easier to ignore your decline when you yourself are less present, less vocal, less insistent. Your requests become suggestions, your opinions optional. You learn that invisibility, once achieved, is a permanent state. The meetings continue, but your absence, physical or otherwise, is never remarked upon. Even your family adapts. Your mother's visits grow shorter. Your siblings grow older and busier. Your father, if he is still alive, is a shadow at the edge of the story. You see their love sometimes in small gestures, a favorite pastry left on a table, a warm cloak draped over your shoulders, but these kindnesses are infrequent. The daily rituals of affection are replaced by a gentle, persistent distancing. Perhaps the strangest change is in your own heart, where once you felt anger or sorrow at each new loss, now there is only a dull acceptance, a shrug of the spirit. You stop expecting the world to accommodate your weaknesses. You make peace, or something like it, with the slow subtraction of companionship. You learn to savor solitude, not because you enjoy it, but because it is the only flavor left. The priests, ever present, offer theological comfort. You are closer to God, one says, now that you are free from the distractions of the flesh. You try to believe it. You imagine sometimes that this numbness is a kind of sanctity, a preparation for the afterlife. More often, though, it feels like a rehearsal for absence, a slow, deliberate fading from the world, one sense at a time. Every so often, a friend returns out of guilt or duty. The conversation is awkward. The subjects are carefully chosen. No one mentions the gloves, the change in your voice, the way you drop your cup and pretend it was intentional. You laugh at their jokes even when you cannot remember what laughter feels like. They leave quickly, relieved, and promise to visit again soon. You do not wait for them. Your dreams, too, change. Where once you dreamed of riding, of sword play, of running through the olive groves, now you dream only of watching, silent, invisible, observing life as it flows past, unable to reach out and touch it. You wake with the feeling that you have already left, that you are only a memory of yourself, haunting the palace you once ruled, and so you settle into your new life, a life of absence, of quiet, of careful observation. You become a connoisseur of loss, an expert in the art of letting go. You tell yourself on your best days that this is wisdom. On your worst, it is simply loneliness, pure and unadorned. In Jerusalem, in this time, in this place, even kings must learn to live with emptiness. Yours is just a little more literal than most. You are a king, and kings are expected to lead. That is the ideal, at least, the myth retold in poems and sermons, where kings ride at the front of glittering armies and win their kingdoms not with ink and seals, but with the clash of steel and the thunder of hooves. You, however, live in the 12th century, where the only thing louder than the noise of battle is the silence of chronic illness. It is not that you do not try. You rise before dawn, dress in armor that grows heavier every year, and present yourself to your commanders with the rigid dignity that comes from habit, not health. Your hands, wrapped in silk and hidden under gauntlets, no longer grip a sword with any confidence. When you do manage to mount your horse, you do so with the help of two loyal knights, neither of whom meets your eyes. War is a constant presence in Jerusalem. The city itself is a prize, a crossroads, a problem that everyone seems determined to solve with violence. Every few years, a new threat appears: a siege from the north, a raid from the south, a rumor of Saladin's armies massing just beyond the horizon. Each new crisis demands a king, not a patient. You make speeches, you rally the troops, you raise the standard and pray that your voice carries further than your reputation for fragility. The men cheer because they must. The priests bless the banners, the trumpets sound, and for a moment you almost believe in the fantasy that your presence matters, that your example inspires, that your illness can be set aside for the sake of duty. But reality returns, as it always does, with the dawn. In the saddle, the world sways. Your hands, numb and stiff, can barely hold the reins. You delegate more and pull more, trusting your commanders to interpret your orders and hoping they do not interpret too much. You are seen at the front, but rarely for long. Soon enough, you retreat to the safety of the rear guard, a figurehead on horseback, surrounded by a protective wall of knights who are there as much to protect you from embarrassment as from arrows. Sometimes the campaigns go well. Victories are celebrated as proof that God still favors Jerusalem and its leper king. Chroniclers, those tireless optimists, record your presence at each battle, making no mention of how many times you almost fell from your horse, or how many decisions were made in your name while you sat shivering with fever in a campaign tent. Other times, the campaigns go poorly, and your absence from the decisive charge becomes another reason for rumors and speculation. Your body, always your greatest adversary, now becomes a diplomatic problem. Allies must be reassured, enemies must be deceived. Every letter to a foreign ruler is carefully worded to downplay your illness. When ambassadors visit, you are dressed in your finest, propped up like an actor in the final scene of a tragedy, made to look as kingly as possible for as long as possible. When you tire, your advisors whisk you away, explaining that the affairs of state require your immediate attention. The army knows, of course. Soldiers are experts in rumor. They know which commanders really give the orders, which messengers run between tents with urgent new instructions. They know the difference between a king who leads and a king who watches. They salute you, but their respect is laced with pity. Around the campfires, your exploits become stories, some heroic, some comic, all tinged with the knowledge that you are fighting not only the enemies of Jerusalem, but the relentless decay of your own flesh. You read the chronicles written by your clerks. They record your triumphs, your speeches, your miraculous endurance. They do not mention the days you spend alone, feverish and shaking, unable to rise from your bed. They do not mention the moments when your hands cannot close around the hilt of a sword, or when your feet, swollen and numb, refuse to carry you more than a few paces. They certainly do not record the nights when you lie awake, listening to the distant sounds of battle and wondering if your kingdom would be better off with a king who could actually fight. Defeat brings a different kind of humiliation. When things go badly, blame follows the path of least resistance. Some whisper that your illness is a sign of God's displeasure. Others suggest that your presence on the battlefield is more dangerous than your absence. Your council debates, behind closed doors, of course, whether the time has come to appoint a regent, someone to lead the army while you recover. Recovery, everyone knows, is a polite fiction. You grow used to the choreography of impotence. Your seal is affixed to orders you did not write, your name attached to victories you did not win. In private, your commanders treat you with exaggerated deference, the kind reserved for relics or dangerous weapons. In public, they cheer your name, then quietly prepare for the day when they will no longer need to. There are moments of dark humor. Once, in the chaos of retreat, you are nearly left behind, your horse bolting, your grip slipping, your voice lost in the clamor. You are rescued by a sergeant who later apologizes for not recognizing his king in time. No one expects to find a king in the dust, he says. You laugh, because it is either that or scream. Eventually, you come to terms with your role, a figurehead, a symbol, a name on a standard. Your power is not in leading charges or swinging swords, but in simply remaining visible, reminding your people and your enemies alike that Jerusalem still has a king. You accept that your true battles are fought not on the fields outside the city, but within the narrow confines of your own failing body. The campaigns continue as they must. Wars are won and lost. Generals rise and fall, and the chroniclers fill their pages with tales of courage and faith. Your story is included, but always with a sense of waiting, as if everyone is holding their breath for the next chapter, a chapter that will not, cannot include you at its center. And so you endure, caught between duty and disease, between legend and reality, between what is expected of a king and what is possible for a dying man. The chronicles record your victories, but you remember the defeats, the slow, grinding defeat that is your life. By now, you know that the true business of royalty is not found in the throne room or the council chamber, but in the silent hours behind closed doors where the world's attention cannot reach. Here, stripped of titles and ceremony, you face your real kingdom, a realm of shadows, silence, and pain. Day after day, you become intimately acquainted with the slow geometry of suffering. The world outside may still call you king, but in this narrow, candlelit room, your power is limited to the position of your pillows, the angle of your aching limbs. the decision of whether to accept or refuse the latest useless remedy. Time, in this place, stretches and folds in on itself. Each night brings fresh, small humiliations, soiling your sheets, failing to rise unaided, crying out in your sleep, and waking to the startled faces of servants who pretend not to notice. You become an expert in disappointment. The morning brings a new bandage, a new salve, a new prayer whispered urgently by a priest who always has somewhere more important to be. You submit to their care, not because you expect it to help, but because refusing would require energy you no longer possess. The rituals are comforting in their predictability, even as your body betrays you in new and inventive ways. The pain is not always sharp or dramatic. Most of the time, it is a background drone, the sensation of your bones grinding together, of muscles cramping, of joints refusing to cooperate. On good days, the aches are dull and manageable, like a persistent headache that never quite resolves. On bad days, every movement is a negotiation, a wager that today's small task will not result in tomorrow's agony. You become skilled at calculating risk. How far can you walk? How tightly can you grip a cup? Which steps will creak loudest when you drag yourself from the bed to the window simply to watch the world and remember what it was like to be part of it? Your staff tries to shield you from the worst of it. They speak in soft voices, draw the curtains against the glare, and bring you whatever distraction is available: a book, a lute, a letter from a distant cousin who pretends not to know how ill you are. Sometimes, in the quietest moments, a nurse will simply sit beside your bed and hum a childhood song, as if the music might reach the parts of you that medicine cannot. But privacy is no longer yours to command. Even your suffering must be managed, sanitized, explained. The court cannot afford rumors of a king in agony, so your attendants rehearse their own version of the truth. The king is resting, the king is meditating, the king is at prayer. No one mentions the smell of infected wounds, the stains that cannot be scrubbed from the linens, the way your hands tremble when you try to sign your name. The business of monarchy continues as if you are still whole. You learn to resent the faces that pity you. You prefer those who simply do their work without comment. The steward who changes your sheets, the guard who stands outside your door in silent solidarity, the old cook who remembers your favorite bread and brings it, still warm, whether you ask for it or not. Pity, you discover, is simply a more refined form of fear. At night, when the palace is quiet and the city's sounds drift in through the shutters, you count your breaths and wonder how many more you have left. Some nights you pray, though less for healing and more for an end to the waiting. Other nights you try to remember happier times, childhood games, feasts, the clamor of the city's markets. The memories come in fragments, half buried beneath the weight of exhaustion and fever. Illness is a lonely thing. You have learned this lesson well. Friends avoid your chamber, family grows silent, letters arrive less often. Even the priests, who once crowded your bedside with relics and hope, visit in smaller numbers now, their voices thin and uncertain. You are left alone with your body and your thoughts, a dialogue that is rarely pleasant. There are, of course, days that blur together when the pain is so steady, so total, that time itself ceases to matter. The servants come and go, the candles burn down, the sun rises and sets behind the thick stone walls. You lose track of the hours, then the days. Your world shrinks to the width of your mattress, the view from your window, the quiet shuffle of feet in the corridor. You do not rage, not anymore. Anger is a luxury for the strong. What you feel is simpler, a steady, persistent regret for all the things you will not do, all the places you will not go, all the people who will remember you, not as a king, but as a warning. You become, in your own mind, a story already half written, a list of absences and failures, annotated by the names of those who watched you fade and looked away. Sometimes, on nights when sleep will not come, you listen for the sounds of life beyond your door, the distant laughter from the kitchens, the clink of armor from the guards, the soft murmurs of lovers in some hidden corner of the palace. You remind yourself that these too are your subjects, your world. Even if you can no longer touch it, you are still, in some small way, part of it. And so you endure, behind closed doors, the quiet, unglamorous suffering of the dying. In another age, perhaps, your pain would be private, unrecorded. Here, it is just another part of the machinery of royalty, a secret everyone knows, a truth everyone denies. You do not ask for pity, or for prayers, or even for company. You simply ask for the strength to meet the morning, whatever it brings. And, for now, that is enough. It is one thing to be a king, another to be a symbol, and quite another to become a warning, an embodied lesson in the impermanence of power. The palace is full of reminders that nothing lasts forever. Fading tapestries, cracked tiles, old swords displayed above the doors. Yet none of these artifacts are as effective, as haunting, as you. You, a young man crowned in glory and now marked by disease, are the story that everyone tells themselves when the candles burn low and the wind rattles the shutters. This too shall pass. There is a particular irony to your situation. In theory, your authority is absolute. You are the chosen of God, the heir of kings, the earthly shepherd of a holy city. In practice, you are watched as if you were a rare, dangerous animal, an object of both reverence and dread. Your physical presence in the council chamber, the chapel, the courtyard, is less an inspiration than a sobering lesson. Every cough, every stumble, every visible wound becomes another verse in the ongoing sermon about the limits of human ambition. The younger knights, eager and naive, look at you with a mixture of awe and horror. You represent everything they desire: glory, lineage, fame, and everything they fear: weakness, loss, the slow disintegration of body and purpose. Some avoid your gaze, as if eye contact alone might transmit your fate. Others watch you too closely, searching for signs, perhaps, that the gods might still intervene at the last moment. You disappoint them daily. The older lords are subtler in their judgments. They have seen power come and go, seen men rise and fall with the caprice of luck and the slow march of years. They pay you respect, but it is the respect one gives to a relic, valuable but brittle, important but easily replaced. They ask for your blessing on their sons, but they are already thinking of the next coronation, the next alliance, the next candidate for a throne that is always slightly too big for its occupant. Your body, so recently the focus of hope and succession, is now a symbol of decline. The rumors of your suffering spread through the city, amplified and embellished at every retelling. Some say you are being punished for the sins of your ancestors. Others suggest your disease is the price for too much ambition or too little faith. The chroniclers, ever eager for a moral, pen lengthy digressions on the vanity of earthly glory and the inevitable victory of the grave. You suspect some of them started their manuscripts the day you were crowned. You become, in effect, a mobile memento mori. Wherever you go, you remind your court, and by extension, your people, of the thin, crumbling line between majesty and misery. The church leans into the metaphor, using your plight as proof that humility is the only true path, that kings are dust and will return to dust, no matter how many armies they command or how many relics they possess. Priests and preachers speak of you from their pulpits, sometimes with compassion, sometimes with thinly veiled satisfaction. You are both cautionary tale and convenient object lesson. In private, you try not to resent this new role. It is, after all, what remains to you. If you can no longer rule through strength, then perhaps you can rule through endurance. If you cannot inspire fear, then perhaps you can inspire humility. You adopt the patience of the terminally ill, accepting that every conversation is now slightly funereal, every compliment tinged with condolences. You listen to speeches about fate, about God's will, about the grand tapestry of history in which even the brightest threads must one day fade. You nod, because what else is there to do? The palace staff, too, are affected. The young pages move more quietly when you pass. The cooks send special broths to your chamber, and the gardeners plant white lilies in the courtyard, the flower of morning, though no one says so aloud. You sense, sometimes, that your decline is the only honest thing happening in a world otherwise devoted to pretense. Outside the palace, your condition becomes the favorite subject of street philosophers and market gossips. The people argue, is it better to live briefly and brilliantly, like you, or to fade quietly, like 100 forgotten cousins buried in the shade of the city walls? The question has no answer, but it provides comfort or distraction to those who will never sit on a throne and never have to face the audience when the play is nearly done. You have become the negative space around which the kingdom arranges itself. Every decision, every ceremony, every minor policy is shaped by the unspoken reality of your slow public demise. The Lord's plan for the future. The priests sermonize about the past, and the chroniclers sharpen their quills for the inevitable conclusion. You are present for all of it, and yet you are already being written into the past tense. There are days, of course, when the symbolism becomes too heavy to bear. You find yourself wishing to be simply sick, simply young, simply allowed to live or die without the additional burden of meaning. But in Jerusalem, nothing is ever simple. Even your decay must be instructive, your failures didactic, your suffering a parable for the ages. So you sit, a king among ruins, a ghost among the living, a reminder to all who see you that the world is not made for the permanence of kings, nor for the comfort of those who follow them. You are the lesson that none of them want, but all must learn. Power is fleeting, bodies are fragile, kingdoms are built on the bones of those who came before and will fall to dust in turn. And so every day you teach, whether you want to or not, in silence, in pain, in the simple act of continuing, you become the answer to a question no one dared to ask. What happens when a king becomes the monument to his own mortality? You would think that being the living embodiment of frailty and impermanence might buy you some pity, perhaps even a degree of privacy. But in the world of kings and courtiers, even your affliction is just another tool, another pawn on the endless, bloodless chessboard of power. Your illness, once a private agony, is now public currency. The courtiers wield it like a dagger sharpened on both sides. To your friends, you are an object of sympathy and loyalty, a wounded king to be protected, perhaps quietly propped up behind the scenes. To your rivals, you are a convenient excuse for their own ambitions, a justification for every whisper, every plot, every recalculation of the line of succession. The council meetings, once arenas for debate, have become something closer to a ritual in damage control. Every proposal, every plea is prefaced by a respectful mention of your bravery in adversity or your heroic endurance. It is all very moving, at least on the surface. Underneath, every word is an argument for why someone else should be making decisions, why the burden should be shared, or ideally, shifted entirely. One day, a lord whose name you can barely recall stands and, in the most respectful tones, suggests the creation of a regency council just until your health recovers, of course. He looks at you as he says this, eyes wide with calculated concern. The implication is clear. Jerusalem needs a strong hand, not a trembling one. Your supporters leap to your defense, but their words are hollow, more performance than passion. Even they cannot ignore the logic of decline. Every time you are too ill to attend a meeting, it becomes evidence against you. Every canceled audience, every delayed judgment is added to a secret ledger maintained by your enemies. You can almost see the columns, days absent, orders signed by proxy, decisions deferred. You become the subject of rumors so frequent and so detailed that you sometimes learn new symptoms from the gossip before you feel them yourself. Religious figures, never ones to miss an opportunity, find in your sickness a blank canvas for sermons about fate, sin, and the will of God. Some claim your illness is proof of divine testing, a call for the kingdom's humility. Others, less charitable, see it as a sign that the city needs new leadership, a purer vessel for the sacred charge of Jerusalem. The pulpit becomes as political as the council chamber. Every priest who prays for your healing is also quietly blessing the man who will replace you. Even foreign ambassadors are drawn into the drama. Letters arrive from Constantinople, from Rome, from distant courts whose kings are eager for any sign of weakness in the Holy Land. They phrase their inquiries delicately, always hoping for an opening, a marriage alliance here, a trade concession there, anything to fill the space left by a fading monarch. Some even send gifts, relics, cures, offers of military support. Each gift is a little heavier than the last, as if to remind you that your absence would make things so much simpler. The people of Jerusalem, for their part, are divided. To some, you are a martyr king, a tragic hero enduring suffering for the sake of the city. To others, you are a liability, a reminder that while God's city may be eternal, its kings are very much not. The markets buzz with speculation. Rumors blossom and wither in the space of a day. The king has been cured by a saint's relic. The king is being poisoned by his own advisors. The king has already died and a look-alike sits in his place. Your illness is used to justify nearly every political maneuver. New taxes are levied to support the royal household during this difficult time. Old laws are revived to ensure stability in the king's absence. Every unpopular policy is now draped in the dignity of your suffering, as if your pain somehow sanctifies the unpleasant necessities of government. If you object, your protest is interpreted as a symptom, another sign that your mind, like your body, is failing. On the rare occasions when you are well enough to intervene directly, you notice the change in the atmosphere. Courtiers stiffen, advisors speak slowly, as if addressing a child. They ask for your approval on plans already set in motion. If you dissent, they nod gravely and promise to consider your perspective, a phrase that, in palace dialect, means ignore entirely. You find yourself both everywhere and nowhere, present in name, absent in consequence. The most loyal members of your circle struggle with the situation. Some urge you to retire gracefully, to embrace your suffering as a path to sainthood. Others beg you to fight on, if only to prevent your enemies from seizing power. Their advice is always conflicting, always urgent, and always, ultimately, about themselves. You realize, in your clearest moments, that your sickness has become the language of politics. No argument is complete without a reference to your state, no alliance secure without a whispered plan for what comes next. Your flesh, once your own, is now the property of the kingdom, a battlefield on which men and women compete for position, advantage, and the right to write the next chapter of history. You try to reclaim some agency. You speak when you can. You sign orders, issue judgments, remind your court that the crown is not so easily removed. But every act of will is met with a polite, suffocating wave of concern. For your health, sire, for the stability of Jerusalem, for the good of all. Their voices are gentle, their hands guiding you back to bed, back to silence, back to invisibility. You are not the first king to be used this way, and you will not be the last. Power, you understand now, is never truly personal. It is a tool, a weapon, an inheritance that is wielded and shaped by those strong enough or ruthless enough to survive its passing. Your illness is simply the latest excuse, the latest mask for ambitions older than the city itself. And so, day by day, you watch as your body is written into law, into sermons, into every private negotiation and public proclamation. You are both the subject and the object of politics, a king whose suffering is at once a personal torment and a public convenience. There is, in the end, a certain grim satisfaction in knowing that, for all their plotting, none of them can escape what you embody. The inescapable, untidy end of every reign, the final victory of time over ambition, of frailty over power. You are the king, and now, unmistakably, the pretext. Time, which once moved at the stately pace of royal ritual and council meetings, now collapses into a blur of hours measured in pain and exhaustion. The last months of your life are a study in entropy. You, the King of Jerusalem, find your world shrinking, first to your private chambers, then to your bed, then to the brittle territory of your own fading mind. Every morning is a negotiation. Which part of your body will function today? Some days, your hands are only numb, not useless. Other days, your feet refuse to support your weight, and your attempts at dignity dissolve in the arms of silent, efficient attendants. Even your voice, once your last bastion of authority, is often reduced to a whisper, swallowed by the thickness in your throat and the fever that never quite breaks. You are, in the end, still surrounded by people. The court is never empty, but their presence is more shadow than substance. Physicians drift in and out, speaking in guarded tones, as if naming your decline aloud might hasten its progress. They prescribe new regimes with a kind of professional hopelessness, each one more elaborate than the last. Broths made from birds you have never heard of, ointments with names older than your kingdom, prayers recited backwards at dawn. Their eyes never quite meet yours. The rituals of kingship continue, reduced now to gestures and appearances. You are dressed in fresh linens daily, bathed by careful hands, anointed with the same holy oil that once crowned you. When you are able, you are wheeled to the window to look out over the city. Jerusalem bakes in the sun, indifferent to your suffering, its towers and domes as remote as the stars. You wonder sometimes if the city itself is tired, if its stones have learned, like you, the art of enduring what cannot be changed. Food is a trial. The act of eating, once a pleasure or at least a distraction, becomes another battlefield. The flavors are distant, the textures alarming. Some days you choke on nothing, your throat clenching as if to remind you that even swallowing is no longer guaranteed. On better days, you manage a few mouthfuls, cheered on by attendants who pretend this is a victory. On worse days, the food returns untouched to the kitchens, where someone, no one ever says who, keeps a tally of your decline. Your dreams are no longer an escape. Fever colors your sleep with visions, endless corridors, faces half remembered, the clang of distant bells. Sometimes you dream you are healthy, whole, running through gardens with friends long dead. These dreams are the cruelest. You wake with the weight of loss pressing against your chest, and for a moment, you are surprised to find yourself still here, still shackled to a body that no longer belongs to you. Despair is your closest companion now. It comes not in dramatic waves, but in the steady erosion of hope. You watch as the world organizes itself for your absence. Advisors grow bolder in their planning, your family more remote. There are meetings to which you are not invited, decisions made in your name, but not by your hand. The language of the court shifts subtly. When replaces if. Succession replaces healing. The future arrives quietly without you. There are moments of clarity, brief windows when you see your situation with almost scientific detachment. You observe the mechanics of dying, the slow retreat of appetite, the unpredictable fevers, the patience of those who wait on you, the tension of those who wait for you to die. You realize, with a sort of bitter amusement, that death is not a moment but a process. You are dying, have been dying, for so long that it feels like another form of life. You try to find meaning in small things. A letter from a distant friend, a story from a loyal servant, the warmth of sunlight on your face for a few minutes each day. You count these blessings, even as you know they are not enough. Gratitude becomes a discipline, something to practice when all else has failed. Priests visit as they always have, offering comfort, offering absolution, offering answers to questions you stopped asking months ago. Some urge you to accept your suffering as a test, a path to sainthood. Others, more honest or more tired, simply sit with you in silence. You begin to appreciate the value of words unspoken. Despair does not always look like despair. Sometimes it is just fatigue, the kind that seeps into your bones and makes every task feel monumental. Sometimes it is a restless anger at the injustice of it all, the wasted potential, the ambitions left unfinished, the friendships left unresolved. Sometimes it is a numbness so complete you forget, for hours at a time, that you are even ill. You simply exist, drifting through your last days like a ghost already haunting his own tomb. Your attendants, those still loyal, try to maintain the fiction of normalcy. They tell you stories of the city, of the court, of the world beyond your window. You listen, not because you care, but because it helps them as much as it helps you. In the end, you are all participants in the same play, each reciting your lines until the final curtain. There is, in these last months, a strange kind of freedom. No one expects anything from you anymore. You can speak plainly or not at all. You can refuse visitors, refuse food, refuse hope. The world continues without you, and you, finally, are allowed to observe it without obligation. You have time to make your peace, if peace is what you want. You have time to mourn yourself, to remember the boy you were and the king you became, to let go of the future that will belong to others. You even have time, now and then, to laugh at the absurdity of it all, that the King of Jerusalem should end not with a battle, but with a whimper. This is what the last months are, not a tragedy, not a romance, not even much of a story. They are simply time, unspooling, unraveling, leading you inexorably to the last chapter when even your despair will be replaced by something quieter, something final. In the beginning, faith was a habit. Your childhood was built on rituals, muttered prayers, hurried blessings, the constant presence of priests and relics in every room. You learned to make the sign of the cross before you could speak in sentences. God was everywhere, in the whispers of your nurse, in the thundering sermons of bishops, in the anxious faces of the palace staff as they sprinkled holy water and salt in the doorways. Faith was part of the furniture, another stone in Jerusalem's heavy walls. But now, as your body unravels and the daily business of living becomes a litany of loss, faith is no longer a background noise. It is a question, a wound, and sometimes, on your best days, a faint, unsteady comfort. You find yourself bargaining with God in the dark hours before dawn. You ask not for miracles, not anymore, but for small mercies. A day without fever, a night without nightmares, the ability to grip a spoon or rise from bed without help. You are careful to phrase your prayers modestly, as if humility might tip the scales in your favor. Let me hold on a little longer, you whisper, or at least let it not get worse. There is never an answer, but hope is cheap, and the alternative is unbearable. The priests, of course, have explanations. Some assure you that suffering is a gift, that pain draws you nearer to God, that your affliction is a mark of divine attention, not abandonment. They cite Job, the martyrs, the saints who endured worse and became legends for it. You try to believe them, but the stories ring hollow in the echoing chambers of your illness. No one ever describes the boredom, the embarrassment, the loneliness of being holy while your body is falling apart. Others are less comforting. They hint that perhaps this is punishment, a reckoning for the sins of your ancestors, for pride, for ambition, for some nameless fault in your soul. You begin to inventory your life, searching for the moment where you went wrong, the word you should not have spoken, the kindness you failed to extend. The exercise is endless and fruitless, but it keeps you company when sleep will not come. Sometimes, in the quietest moments, you wonder if God is simply tired. Jerusalem is full of prayers, rising every hour from towers and chapels and alleyways. Perhaps even the Almighty grows weary of so much pleading, so many bargains struck and broken, so many kings and peasants all demanding attention. You picture God looking down at your palace, seeing a sick boy in a bed, and thinking, "This one again?" You are not alone in your spiritual uncertainty. Your household, once confident in the power of faith, grows uneasy. The palace chaplain, who once thundered from the pulpit, now sits quietly at your bedside, his prayers softer, his silences longer. The servants who cross themselves in your presence do so with a kind of desperation, as if they fear that merely being near you might bring bad luck. Your mother weeps more often in chapel, her prayers growing frantic as yours grow weary. Publicly, you maintain the rituals. You attend Mass when you can, receive the sacraments, listen politely as relics are pressed into your hands and blessings are murmured over your head. There is comfort in the repetition, if not in the meaning. The priests assure the court that you are an example of patience, a model of faith in adversity. You nod, smile, and repeat the necessary phrases. Even kings, you have learned, are expected to perform faith for the benefit of the living. Privately, your relationship with God is complicated. Some days you rage silently or as loudly as your failing voice allows. You demand to know why. Why you? Why now? Why like this? There is never a satisfactory answer, and the questions echo back, unanswered, from the stone ceiling. Other days you are grateful for the sun on your face, for a friend's letter, for a moment without pain. On these days, God is a presence, distant but not absent, inscrutable but not uncaring. You begin to pray for others, not because you are especially holy, but because it is easier than praying for yourself. You pray for your mother, for your loyal attendants, for the city that seethes and suffers just beyond your window. You pray that your death, when it comes, will be a relief and not a scandal, a chapter cloned quietly rather than a wound torn open. You pray, above all, that those who come after you will be spared your fate, not just the pain, but the slow erasure of self, the unending uncertainty. At times, faith is as much memory as hope. You remember childhood prayers, lullabies sung in the dark, the hush of candlelit chapels on winter nights. You remember the feeling of certainty, the comfort of believing that someone, God, the saints, your parents, was in charge, that suffering was temporary, that joy would return. These memories are a balm, even if you no longer trust in their truth. As your body fails, your faith mutates. It becomes less about answers and more about endurance, less about certainty and more about acceptance. You pray not for miracles, but for patience, not for deliverance, but for peace. You pray that in the end, God will look at you and see not a failed king, not a leper, not a disappointment, but simply a child who tried to believe, even when belief was hard. And perhaps, in the end, that is enough. Your world has been shrinking for months, your sphere of influence reduced to the dimensions of a sick room, and the people allowed to enter it. By now, death is not a dramatic intruder, but a slow, methodical visitor, one who lingers at the door and gives everyone plenty of time to rehearse their goodbyes. The court, never one to let a ceremony go to waste, transforms your decline into a series of rituals. There is a script for everything, for prayers, for the changing of linens, for the washing of your face, for the endless parade of bishops and monks who come to offer last rites whether you are ready or not. Even your dying must be done properly, with a schedule and witnesses, and, if possible, the air of quiet dignity that no real death ever quite achieves. You are surrounded by the trappings of sanctity. Every surface is covered with relics, splinters of wood, bits of bone, drops of oil, each one guaranteed, in theory, to hasten your passage to a better world. The air is thick with incense, a cloying mixture that masks the other, more human smells of fever and decay. Candles burn at all hours, both for light and for the symbolic battle against the darkness creeping ever closer. Your attendants move quietly now, their footsteps muffled by layers of cloth. They speak in whispers, as if the walls themselves are listening. Some are old hands at this. They have prepared other bodies for other deaths, though never a king's. They lay out the garments you will wear for your final journey, plain linen, simple, as if humility at the last moment can erase a lifetime of ceremony. Priests and confessors visit in shifts, rotating like monks in a monastery. Each offers the comfort of ritual, prayers for forgiveness, anointing of the sick, the sacrament of the Eucharist placed on your tongue when you can barely swallow. They reassure you that heaven awaits, that your suffering will soon end, that God is more merciful than the world you are leaving behind. You say the words, perform the acts, more out of habit than conviction. Even faith, in the end, is a routine. Your family, what remains of it, gathers as well. Faces appear at your bedside, some familiar, some strained by guilt or anxiety or simple exhaustion. There are final conversations, though little is actually said. The most important words have already been spoken or never needed speaking. Sometimes you catch your mother watching you when she thinks you are asleep, her eyes red, her hands twisting the hem of her robe. There is nothing left to say that will make this easier. Outside, the palace is strangely busy. There are preparations for your death, just as there were once preparations for your birth, your coronation, your first campaign. The palace staff polish silver, air out the banners, argue over funeral processions and burial sites. Chroniclers sharpen their quills, eager to record the details, to make your exit as memorable as your entrance. You are expected to die with grace and gravity, to provide the city with a spectacle worthy of a king, even if you are too weak to care. There are, of course, practicalities. Your confessor helps you compose a will, or at least a final blessing for your successor. Seals are pressed into wax, signatures witnessed by trembling hands. Your possessions, never many, but somehow always too numerous, are sorted and distributed, a ring for this advisor, a cloak for that cousin, a book or a cup for a favored servant. Each item leaves your chamber, a small subtraction, another sign that you are almost gone. Death, for all its inevitability, is surprisingly bureaucratic. The notaries and priests require forms and confirmations. The courtiers require clear instructions so that no one can dispute your wishes once you are gone. Even dying is an administrative task, an exercise in lists and signatures and official witnesses. In the last days, you find a strange peace in the repetition of these rituals. There is comfort in the familiar, the prayers you learned as a child, the steady rhythm of the bell marking the hours, the soft voices of those who refuse to abandon you. The world outside your room grows vague and distant, All that matters now is the slow, careful preparation for a journey you will make alone. You are washed and dressed, your body arranged just so, your head turned to the east. The last sacrament is given, the last prayer murmured, the last candle lit. Your attendants take turns sitting at your bedside, some in silence, some quietly weeping. No one is surprised when you begin to slip away. The only surprise is that it took so long. You do not rage, not anymore. You do not pray for a miracle. You accept the end as you have accepted everything else, with a mixture of resignation, exhaustion, and the dark humor of someone who has seen enough to know that dignity is mostly a matter of timing. The rituals proceed, and you let them. It is easier than resisting. Outside your window, life continues. The bells ring, the markets hum, the soldiers march. You are reminded that the world is large, that your passing, no matter how carefully orchestrated, will soon be just another event, another story added to the city's crowded history. You are not the first to die in Jerusalem, nor the last. And so, surrounded by prayers and candlelight, with the rituals of both church and palace marking your passage, you prepare to depart, not as a king, not as a symbol, but simply as yourself. For a brief moment, that is enough. No one ever describes death as it really is. The stories prefer drama, last words shouted from a fevered bed, the crack of thunder, weeping crowds, and heavenly choirs. But your death, when it finally arrives, is as quiet and as drawn out as every other event in your royal life. There is no grand climax, no sudden reversal, no flash of revelation that justifies the suffering. It is instead a gradual unwinding, a series of small surrenders, another breath, another pause, a sense that time is finally ready to let you go. The people in the room, there are always people, for a king never really gets to die alone, are exhausted. Some have not slept for days, hovering at the edge of your bed in shifts, waiting for a sign that the end has come. They speak in murmurs, and even the doctors are subdued, their rituals long since performed, their presence now a matter of habit rather than hope. They watch you fade with the same mixture of relief and reluctance reserved for the end of a difficult season. You are barely conscious by now. The world narrows to a blur of candlelight, the soft rhythm of whispered prayers, the distant tolling of a bell. The faces around you are indistinct, the voices gentle and repetitive. Someone holds your hand, a hand you barely feel anymore. Someone else wipes your forehead with a damp cloth. The old priest mutters his final blessing, the words as familiar as lullabies. No one expects a miracle. Even the most fervent have stopped pretending that you might suddenly sit up, healed and whole. If there is pain, it is far away, muffled by fever and fatigue. You float in and out of dreams, and sometimes it is difficult to tell which world you inhabit. In one, you are a boy again, running through sunlit courtyards, your body whole and your future unwritten. In another, you are king, encircled by knights and banners, the noise of a city that once seemed yours. But mostly, You are simply tired, too tired to be afraid, too tired even to care. The final hours pass not with a rush, but with a slow, unremarkable decrescendo. Your breathing grows shallower, pauses more often, until the space between breaths is longer than the breath itself. There is no dramatic gasp, no trembling hand grasping for meaning. There is only the fading of sensation, the gentle release of tension, the slow, barely noticed transition from one state to another. The world does not pause for your departure. The bells toll, but they toll for everyone. The servants continue their duties, the guards their rounds, the city its business. The priests finish their prayers and begin discussing the arrangements. There are always arrangements. The chroniclers sharpen their quills, anxious to capture whatever detail might set your death apart from the hundreds they have already recorded. For your family, if they are present, the moment is a relief spiked with sorrow. The waiting is over. The narrative has reached its conclusion. There will be tears, some real, some ceremonial, some simply the result of exhaustion. There will be an outpouring of grief from the city, or at least the appearance of one. For a few days, your name will be on everyone's lips, your virtues exaggerated, your faults politely minimized. But even this is fleeting. Your body is washed, wrapped, and prepared for burial according to custom. The mourners file past, some whispering prayers, others simply relieved that the uncertainty has ended. The city, restless as always, absorbs your death as it absorbed your reign. A brief disturbance, a topic for gossip, another story folded into the crowded pages of Jerusalem's history. For you, there is no reckoning, no celestial verdict delivered at the moment of passing. There is only the sensation, if it can be called that, of letting go, of sliding quietly beyond the reach of light and sound, of ceasing to be the problem everyone must solve. Death, it turns out, is not a spectacle, but a conclusion as mundane and as necessary as sleep. In the aftermath, life continues with astonishing efficiency. The court begins the business of succession. The chroniclers finish their drafts. The priests argue over the precise nature of your suffering and its meaning. For a few weeks, perhaps, the city is a little quieter, the palace draped in more black than usual. But even this is routine. Death has come and gone so many times in Jerusalem that yours, for all your titles and torments, is neither the first nor the last. No one will remember the moment itself. What remains is the story, polished and repeated, turned into a lesson or a warning, or occasionally a source of inspiration for those who still believe in miracles. Your legacy, such as it is, will be the way you endured, the manner of your decline, the fact that you died as you lived, observed, discussed, and, above all, unremarkably human. Death comes as dully as life, and for a king, as for anyone else, this is all it was ever going to be. In the end, you are less a memory than a monument, a cautionary tale built from the scraps of rumor, the notes of chroniclers, the sermons of priests, and the anxious bedtime stories whispered by those who watched you fail. Your name lingers, not because you were victorious or wise or beloved, but because you were visible in your suffering and public in your decline. They lay you in the ground with all the solemnities your title demands. The cortege winds through Jerusalem's streets. The banners droop in the midday heat, and the crowd, never as large as you imagined it in your youth, watches with a mixture of boredom and relief. A king's funeral is a performance, one last chance for the city to gather its anxieties and wrap them in pageantry before moving on. You are wrapped in linen, anointed, and buried beneath stone, your face quickly fading from the minds of those who did not know you in life and barely cared for you in death. But the rituals do not end with burial. The palace and the cathedral begin their work, shaping your story for the needs of those who remain. You become for a while the subject of prayers, the object of processions, the inspiration for sermons about patience, humility, and the vanity of earthly ambition. Chroniclers use your name as a milestone. Before Baldwin, after Baldwin, measuring time by the slow procession of kings, as if you were nothing more than a number on a ledger. Your suffering becomes useful. Priests describe your leprosy as a test sent by God, a means to teach the court and the city that power is borrowed and fragile, that beauty and strength are fleeting, that kings are as mortal as beggars. You become a living answer to uncomfortable questions. Why do good people suffer? Why do the righteous sometimes wither while the wicked prosper? Why does God seem so often silent? For a time, your grave is visited. The curious come, hoping for a miracle or at least a story. Some bring offerings, flowers, coins, scraps of parchment, with desperate prayers scrawled in uneven hands. Mothers with sick children pass your tomb and cross themselves, not quite believing in your sanctity, but unable to resist the hope that suffering might recognize suffering. The court tries to use your memory to enforce order. Remember Baldwin, they say, when arguments grow heated. Remember what happened to him. The warning is rarely effective, but the habit persists. The chroniclers are not kind. Some describe you as tragic, a king broken by fate before he could fulfill his promise. Others are blunter, cataloging your weaknesses, your failures, your slow disappearance from the world of the living. A few, perhaps out of boredom, perhaps out of pity, suggest that your suffering made you wise, that your endurance was a kind of heroism. But even these accounts are tinged with the awareness that, had you lived in quieter times, your name would have meant nothing at all. Your legacy, such as it is an empty bed, a silent room, the faint memory of a time when a sick king was the center of the world for a handful of anxious people. The palace continues its routines. New rulers arrive, make their mark, and leave behind stories of their own. The old wounds in the stonework outlast the wounds in your flesh. In the wider world, you become less a person than an idea. Historians debate whether your disease changed the kingdom, whether your reign was a turning point or merely another step in Jerusalem's long descent into chaos. Artists occasionally use your image as a symbol of suffering, of lost youth, of the price of holiness in an unholy world. But even these likenesses fade. Paint cracks, stone erodes, parchment is lost or eaten by rats. You have become a monument, not because you wished it, but because that all suffering is, in the end, instructive to those who survive it. You are the example no one wants to follow, the fate that every child prays to avoid, the story that is told in a low voice when the candles burn down and the shadows grow long. And yet, in this quiet, in this posthumous obscurity, there is a kind of peace. Your struggles are over, your pain, so endlessly measured, so publicly consumed, no longer serves anyone's purpose. The world moves on, as it must, as it always does. You are not forgotten, exactly. You are simply absorbed. Your life and your death dissolved into the slow, indifferent flow of history. For those who come after, you are a monument to the things they fear most: sickness, failure, loss, irrelevance. You are the king who became a lesson, the ruler whose greatest achievement was to endure, to persist, to die quietly, and thus remind the living that all flesh is grass and all crowns are temporary. Your tomb stands, silent and unvisited, until even the stone forgets your name. And so, at last, you achieve what so few kings ever manage. You stop being a person or a problem or even a symbol. You become, finally and fully, a part of the world's great, boring history.